Hey everybody, it's Donna Maria. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter. And this week we were reading Dr. Brown's book, Significant. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go ahead and jump right in. This week, a few of you had mentioned that it was a tough read. It is. It took me a couple of times reading this book. There were a lot of characters. There's a lot of information. So much like Chronicles of Narnia or Harry Potter books, it took me a little bit of time to kind of digest it. But good for you guys for getting it done in the short period of time that you had to read it. But when you do have more time, I would encourage you to go back and reread it. It's just a great story. And you'll pick up more of those nuances that you may not have had the opportunity to read just because it's such a tight timeline. But thanks for your participation. I really appreciated it. Everybody did a great job. C.S. Lewis once said, "We do not enjoy a story fully at its first reading. Not until the curiosity, the sheer narrative lust has been given its sop and laid asleep are we at leisure to savor the real beauties." You know, C.S. Lewis went on to talk about children and how children love to hear the same stories over and over and over again. So that's just something to consider. Okay, so the first question that we had was, have you ever thought about addressing an important need through EE fiction? If so, what would it be? Holly mentioned, I think it would be really beneficial to create a work of fiction that addresses the problem of sexual assault. Cassie and Kiri both mentioned grief. I studied under Dr. Wolfelt, Alan Wolfelt, at the Center for Life and Loss and Life Transition. If you, Cassie and Kiri, are interested in learning more about grief, Dr. Wolfelt is a premier expert in the field, and you might enjoy reading more from him. Julie mentioned drug abuse, Daryl, disinformation and fake news. That'd be very timely, Daryl. Good. And Daniel, human trafficking. Frederick added to that about the human trafficking that's happening in our own country right now on the southern border. So there are really timely topics that you could address using this using EE fiction. Okay, Frederick and Daniel, good interactions, important discussion regarding generational differences when considering EE fiction. First rule of public speaking, right? Know your audience. It's also a good rule of thumb for storytelling. Several hadn't considered this, and that's okay. The prompt may have helped you to think about it for the first time. Some of us just don't sit around thinking, well, have I ever thought about addressing an important need through this medium? And that's okay, but you did a really good job digging deep and coming up with some ideas, so good job. Let's see, Lucas was one of the people that said, no, I hadn't really thought about that before. Okay. Why might EE novels increase the experience of being transported into another world? So Cassie says, quote, transportation theory provides a lens for understanding the concept of media enjoyment and furnishes increased understanding of why and how enjoyment occurs in response to media. And Cassie noted that's on page 312. Julie says narrative transportation theory consists of empathy, character identification, and mental imagery. Talking about this week's reading was significant. Julie had talked about Johann and how she developed feelings of empathy for Johann for his situation of being adopted and going off to college. Sadiqa also mentioned by using vivid and detailed descriptions of the setting, the character, and plot, entertainment novels are able to create a world that feels real and tangible, one that readers can easily imagine themselves inhabiting. That's good. Very good. Okay. Frederick said he identified with Johann. Frederick, my 18-year-old son, would totally agree with you. He read Dr. Brown's book last year. Amazingly, this book was written before the pandemic, so that's pretty exciting. I'm thinking, gosh, it's such a portent of things to come. But when he saw that it was on my desk this week, for the readings, he asked if he could borrow it to read it again. So that was exciting to note. My family, we all enjoyed reading this book, but each one of us for very different reasons. So I thought that was very interesting. Johann, we have this sense of empathy for him. Also, I think more I did for the mother. And my son really liked that he was a hero. He had a heroic kind of spirit. I mean, who doesn't love a hero, right? Let's see. There's an underlying message of significance of human life that everyone can identify with. His mother was journaling about prayer and deciding to keep the baby, and that led Johann to feel like, well, he was meant for something important. His life was worth something. He is significant. And my son is adopted, and I think that may be another reason why he strongly identifies with that character. Frederick, you and I are both adoptive parents. So Frederick says, as an adoptive parent, someone who dated a rape victim, a college graduate, and a U.S. Army veteran who served during the 9/11 attacks, thank you for your service, I could see myself being part of Johann's life and experiences. Significant had many elements that appealed to me, which made it easy to be transported mentally into Johann's story and accept the messages it conveys. So whether it was Alana's tragic life or Johann's adoption or the 9/11 attacks or the biological weapons that were used, which we live through the pandemic now, it encourages some new insights, and sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. So Josh says, significant looks to challenge people to not jump to conclusions or fall in line with false stereotypes because a certain group might believe them. Okay, so let's see, Dr. Brown lent this book to me called Plandemic, and it is by Mickey Willis, 100% censored, 0% debunked. The fear is the virus, truth is the cure. I just finished with that book, so if anybody is interested in reading that, it's a good one. Okay, question 3. In the first 18 chapters of the novel Significant, how did the author seek to transport the reader into the world of Johann and his friends as they stumbled upon the threat of an international biological war? So Frederick mentioned character development. Let's see, details about the life of Johann and his biological mother, Alana, Johann's adoption by the Oberhausens, the role of education in Johann's life, and Johann's membership in the secret society. You're so right. We're all cheering for Johann. And as Frederick says, it was action-packed and you had me hooked. And that hook is so important when we're reading. I mean, honestly, I don't know about you guys, but if a book doesn't capture my interest in the first 3 chapters, like I gave it its shot and I'm done. Sadiqa, by creating a vivid and immersive setting and by developing well-rounded and relatable characters, allowing readers to connect with them on a deeper level. Kiri mentioned the literary techniques that Dr. Brown used, including that first-person point of view that we got from Johann, the use of anecdotes and weaving Johann's personal struggles into the story. That's very good. Question 4 In the first 18 chapters of the novel, Significant, how did the author seek to address the stereotypes that many Americans have about U.S. China relations and biological warfare, and why is this important? Sadiqa says the author is able to challenge readers to think critically about these issues and move beyond simplistic assumptions and prejudices. Several of you mentioned stereotypes in here, including Frederick and Sadiqa, stating that this is important because stereotypes and misconceptions can have serious consequences in terms of policy decisions and individual attitudes and behaviors. Okay, and offering a more nuanced and complex understanding of these issues, the author is able to promote a greater understanding and empathy. That's good. And encourage readers to approach these issues with an open and critical mind. Frederick mentioned the trust in the media and the government. That's very timely as well. So that was a point well taken, Frederick. Julie says cultures summed up by government system are false. People in every culture have similar feelings of love toward their families and friends. And isn't that biblical? We can look at 1 Corinthians 13:13, for example, when Paul writes, quote, so now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So you can see how you could share the gospel through these stories, and they're not really overt, which leads us to the next question about the Kappa element. So what is C.S. Lewis's Kappa element in stories? Julie notes the Kappa element is that hidden element that comes from the Greek hidden. It's a secret theme separate from genre or aesthetic, which conveys an underlying subconscious significance to the story landscape. Okay, good. Josh, our goal becomes creating an imaginatively immersive experience which the reader cannot explicitly recognize. Okay, Kiri, tremendous hidden depth. There's an opportunity to preach the gospel through fantasy, as I just said. We see that Kappa element alive and well in Lewis's writings when he's sharing the Christian truth through fantasy. Tolkien helped Lewis see this. Lewis was an atheist in the first half of his life, and there's a wonderful book by Dr. Nicolai, and it examines Sigmund Freud, and C.S. Lewis, and in that book, Lewis converts, and but they both start as atheists, and Freud, of course, he died by suicide, and Lewis found a great deal of peace in his life. So if you're interested in reading more about that, that's a good read for you. Let's see. So C.S. Lewis says he considers this discussion to be the starting point of his re-embracing of the Christian religion. With Tolkien's guidance, he explored the importance of imagination and mythology in the narrative of Jesus Christ. Tolkien noted that the gospel encompasses all the elements of a great tale, such as love triumphing over death, victory despite insurmountable odds, and a renewed world. However, Tolkien went even further than this when he was talking with C.S. Lewis, and he asserts that the gospel is not simply one excellent story among numerous others, but rather the fundamental truth that all other stories point toward. I thought that would be something interesting for you guys to consider as you're thinking about the Kappa element in stories. One thing that I wanted to include at the end of our session together today is that, as as we finished up the Easter season and we had Holy Week last week, we have these 40 days leading up to the Ascension, which this year is on May 18th. And so, as we are continuing to reflect on the mystery of faith and the mystery of uh, God's life, we're called to remember that prayer is a mechanism God uses to change us. And in C.S. Lewis's book, Screwtape Letters, he says, prayers offered in a state of dryness are the prayers that please him most. So I'll leave you guys with that. And I hope that you're doing well. And again, that you had a blessed Easter. And if you need anything, please reach out to me or Dr. Brown. And we're always here to help you guys. Okay. And I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye for now.